So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to give you a static review of this newer model from Lexmoto or Yadea called the G5s. It's a 125cc moped, so the closest there is to it in spec, price, size, etc. is the Robo-S, so we're going to compare it to that. There are others we could compare it to, but not around the same price or size, etc. So we'll do what you usually do and go around the bike and give you some information about it so you can make an informed decision. So let's get to it. Okay, so just to put this into some form of perspective, the reason we haven't included another bike in this comparison is that these are really comparable bikes. Same speed, same battery specification, same wheel size, pretty much same seat height, same length, etc, etc. Another one that we could have included was perhaps the MQI GT Model 45 SR, okay, which is based upon that bike over there. That fits in terms of price right between these two, but the reason we haven't included it is because one, it only goes 45 miles an hour, these two both go 50. It's physically bigger in all dimensions, weight, length, seat height is over 5 centimeters higher, and to get the actual range that's anything like the range quoted on these, you would actually have to go for the ER version, which is £600 more than one of these. So we just thought we'd stick to these two because of those things. Okay, just to talk about the G5s. So this is actually the third G5 that Yadea do, and Yadea are one of the largest sort of two-wheel manufacturers on the planet. They do about 13 million units last year. A lot of bikes, of course, as in push bikes. A lot of different models that we don't get. They've got the EAPC bikes, which are 15 mile an hour with pedals and things like that. But in the G5, there are actually three. So you've got the standard G5, which is this one here. This is 60 volt based, 28 miles an hour, about 2 kilowatts. Then you have something called the G5 Pro, which we don't get, but that is essentially the G5 that I just showed you, but with two batteries, two 60 volt batteries. And then you have this one, which is a 50 mile an hour, 72 volt based dual battery bike. Okay, so don't confuse the G5 Pro with this G5s. Okay, so just to start at the front. So as I said, these two are similar in a lot of ways. They both have, for example, 12-inch wheels. These are both 125cc bikes or license bikes, L3Es in electric terms. And as you see, they both have dual front and back disc brakes. One thing to highlight straight away is about CBS. So CBS is where you pull the front lever and some of the energy to stop the bike goes to the back at the same time. Okay, so that's called CBS. As you note on here though, that there is only one caliper. Okay, so or one lead going into the caliper. So the way Yadea have dealt with the CBS or combined braking is actually when you squeeze this lever, you will feel this lever slightly squeezing as well. And this is the back brake. Okay. So in other words, somewhere, and I guess it's behind here, they have done some sort of mechanics that actually is the equivalent of what you see on the Sunra. Okay, but it is still doing that sort of capability. Okay, so 12-inch wheels are both about the same profile tyres. Not a lot to talk about there. On the actual front of the bike, you notice that the lights are in the front of the panel facing forwards. So we talked about this before, where if you actually think about going into corners, you might consider that the light is still facing forward as you turn into a left or right corner. Okay, not a problem per se, it's just that's the way that they've chosen to do it. One of the other differences between the two though is that this is your indicator here, and up here is your indicators on the G5s. Okay, again, not particularly a problem, although some might argue that having your indicators on the body is exactly what you want, because when you're turning into a corner or at traffic, you want the indicators to be pointing at the traffic that you're coming into, whereas this one, obviously the indicator, if I'm turning left, the indicator is slightly pointing off. They've dealt with it though. If you see the indicators, it's, you still see the indicators at the front, but it's just a difference between the two. And that, by the way, is the noise that indicators make. Right, so going around to the back of the bike to look at the motors. So one of the other differences between the two, this is a 3 kilowatt hub motor. It's Sunra's own. And as you see, hub motor, so direct drive, battery, controller, motor, and off you go. On the Yadea, you actually have a centrally mounted motor, which is what you often find on the more powerful bikes. So here you've got the centrally mounted motor behind here, then there's a cog, a belt, and then the actual main cog for the rear wheel there. But this one is 4.1 kilowatts. So 4.5 kilowatts would be 6 horsepower. So this is 5.5 horsepower, near enough. Whereas the Sunra is only 4 horsepower. So more power in this bike. But what some people argue is that obviously with belts, over time they'll need replacing. They could stretch a little bit and things like that. Also, we have seen some other bikes where there's been a stone chip got into the cog, and that has basically destroyed the belt and the cog, both cogs as well, actually, which means you have to replace everything. They've thought about that though, because this is all enclosed, so you won't suffer from that sort of potential issue on this bike, because behind here this is all enclosed. Okay. The other difference, major difference I guess, is that a belt-driven bike makes noise, okay, whereas a hub motor bike does not. So you'll see that when we fire it up. Okay, so these are the dashboards. So here you see on the G5s, you've got both batteries showing, you have your mode, so your P button engages, and then you've got a very clear display, 7-inch, very, very easy to read. And then as you can hear, the belt is making its noise. You can change modes here to sport. It's only got 2 modes. And there you go. You're getting your 50 miles an hour. It won't get it won't get to 56. Okay, that's without a load, obviously. On the Robo, you do have 3 modes, but on this bike, it's a up, up, down. It's a circular thing. So because we've only got 1 battery, so I can show you the battery, that's why that is flashing and that's why that is on. That isn't an error, it means I've only got 1 battery loaded. Okay, so on this one, don't hear anything. Okay, this is actually an interesting point in itself. This is as fast as this bike will go with 1 battery. Okay, even if I put it into mode 3, it won't go over 34. Okay, that is because the controller is saying, well, I've only got 1 battery and that's all I can give you. So if we just do the same on this bike. Okay, see now it's noticed that only 1 battery. Put it into sport. Oh, there you go, that's your answer. Doesn't go into sport. Okay, about the same. Okay, so you'll find this on a lot of bikes that they have to have both batteries loaded to get the full speed. Okay, there are a couple of bikes where you're essentially carrying the second battery, so it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 2 loaded. So for example, the CPX over here, the EK3 over there in the background, they are essentially carrying the second battery just for range. So you can still get 60 mile an hour in the EK3's case and 56 mile an hour in the CPX's case with 1 or 2 batteries. So it is actually something to think about. Okay, but back to the dash on the Robo. So as you can see, it's again fairly straightforward, a bit 1980s I suppose. And you go through the modes, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 modes, but you go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one of the differences between these two is sort of from an innovation perspective, and in fact a differentiator between this and quite a lot of other bikes. This is a fingerprint recognition element of this Robo. So you program your fingerprint into their app. Okay, so their app isn't for tracking and checking, it's for features. So for example, you can start the bike through the app, you can open the seat through the app, you can enable fingerprint recognition through the app, set the alarm, etc., etc. On the Yadea, there is an app, but not for the UK market right now. Okay, so it's essentially a Chinese-based app. All right. Anyway, going around the dash, you've got, you know, your calipers, your chambers rather, for your brake fluid. You've got hazard lights. You've got lights that are on off. That's the main cluster, and then you've got your full beam down here. Okay, it has got cruise control, which not many bikes have, and to be honest, I don't necessarily see the need for it on these sorts of bikes. But you also have some storage around the front here, bag hook. You've got your USB port, a little bit of storage there. Pretty similar on the Robo, USB port, storage, etc., etc. Okay, so going to under the seat, as you saw, so 72 volt 20 amp hour in both these bikes. Obviously on this bike you have one here and one under the floor. What is interesting is that they provide this little bit of storage. So we'll come on to chargers in a minute, but when I first saw that I thought, oh right, that charger is made to go into that spot, but actually that isn't the case. That charger, although it looks pretty close, it doesn't fit in there. That is for things like locks, disc locks and things like that. They could have possibly thought about that and enabled the charger to be carried on the bike. You can of course get a rack for this. It's the same rack that goes on the standard G5. Okay, the way you get under the floor for the other one is to turn that button, and then here's your second battery. Okay, so 72 volt 20 amp hour times 2 is about 2.8 kilowatt hours. Okay, and of course the same on the Robo-S. The way you get to the batteries underneath on the Robo-S is to basically go to the steering lock, push it in, and then keep turning. Okay. Sorry, let's do this right. It's open already. Right. Okay, so here you see on the Robo-S, this battery, basically you've got your two connectors here. You push this one back and then put this second battery in the front, and then connect it up and then put your floor back down, etc., etc. Okay. Obviously, one of the main advantages with the Robo is that you've got this 24 litres of space. So that is good enough for an open-faced helmet. Okay. There aren't too many bikes that have this amount of space on it. The G5, the standard G5 is similar. And a Hall in EK1 or EK3 has less space but enough for a open-face helmet unless you're carrying both batteries. But this is one of the key advantages of this bike, is that 26 litres of space. Okay. See, both have the seat pad on the back. If you fitted the rack, you would lose this on both bikes. The standard, the rack on the Robo-S comes out here, and you actually take this off. And on the G5, you replace the whole of the rear mechanism, and you get a new one of these with a plate, but not that. Okay. So to talk a bit about chargers. So as you can see here, this is the Sunra charger, 10 amp. So one of the key advantages, if you like, about the G5S is that you can charge both batteries off the bike together. We haven't actually showed it, but there is a splitter that comes with this. So what happens is this plugs into a little box that splits the cable, and then you have two more of these that come out of that box. Okay, and that means that you can charge both batteries off the bike together. Okay, if you were to do that on a Robo, you'd obviously need a second charger, which is another 200 odd pounds. So a good thought of Yadea to do that. The only other bike that we do, or range of bikes that we do, that has a splitter is the NIUs. Okay, they have a splitter box on their chargers. So if you want to charge both batteries off the bike on a Sunra, you need to buy that second charger or swap them. Okay, as you see on here, this is a 12 amp charger, so a little bit higher rated than the Robo, but essentially you're talking about 5 to 6 hours for charging batteries. Okay, it's typically about 5 to 6 hours for charging batteries. Okay, so quoted range. Now this is interesting. Let's say, so the quoted range from Sunra on that bike is 84 miles, and I can pretty much guarantee that isn't what you get. You would therefore think, well, that must mean that it's 70 miles on the Yadea because it's more powerful, and that is indeed what they quote. you will not get 84 miles out for Sunra unless you're riding around, light person, warm day, very slow speed. Similarly, on the G5s, you won't get 70 miles out of it. I estimate you're more likely to get 55 to 60 on this one, and about the same on the Robo. Okay, so a lot of these companies quote ranges that are based upon light riders, warm day, fully charged battery, flat terrain, etc., and not realistic. So knock off at least 20%, I say, and then you're nearer to what you're more likely to get. Okay, so that's range, charging time we've done, power we've done, colours. So this is the red. They do the white. It's a gloss white, quite a nice gloss white, and then they do the graphite grey, which is the same as the standard G5. You can't get the standard G5 in this red, or white for that matter. So it's the graphite grey, black, this red, or a white. On the Robo, it is black or white. Prices, so this is what we're saying. This one is 2,980, okay, and this one is 3,299. Okay, so around about the same, unless you add the second charger to the Robo, then you're getting up into 3,400. All right, so hopefully you found that useful. I don't think there's anything else to tell you. If you want to have a test ride, then you're more than welcome. Follow our YouTube channel for this and other reviews. And if you'd like to contact us with any questions, please feel free to do so at hello@green-mopeds.com. And thanks very much.